Hello everyone, I am Frums, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to use particle effects in Slick2D. Now, particle effects may seem really complex, but if you use a particle system that is already built, then you can really easy make your own particles. This one, for example, I just made this one by just fiddling around with it a bit. Um, But if you want to make more specific ones, then it's obviously going to take a bit more time. Um, a few examples of what you can do with it. This is a torch that I made. Really simple, but it really gives a bit extra to your game. Um, you can also make different effects, like this healing effect. This uses a different particle, but I'll explain a bit about how particle systems work and particle emitters. So a particle emitter is basically a small uh, description of uh, what it has to do. So particle systems exist of two basic things. First you have the description of the emitter, and then you have the particle it's going to use. As you can see here, you see the amount of particles that this emitter is using. So you might guess that you use a small particle and you spawn it a lot of times. And an example of how a particle looks like is this. I added a small layer here for extra vision. You normally don't use that layer. Um, as you can see, it's all white. It starts full white and then goes fades out towards the edge here. Um, what you can do with this is change the color. Um, because I use white, it makes it really easy to change the color, but you can use different colors if you want. It really depends on what you're going to use the particle for. Um, so what it does essentially is it will spawn a lot of this little particle, and it will just give them a direction, and if they grow, where they spawn them. Um, so it will essentially use a small image over and over again, and it really gives a cool effect here. So let's take a look at how we actually build a particle. So let's take this one. Um, what I built here is a small testing um, area. I can move this one around if I want. I can reload it by pressing the spacebar, and I can also move it by using the arrow keys. So how does this work? The emitter is described by an XML file. Um, in Slick2D at least, um, there are more complex particle systems around, but as with most things in Slick2D, it's built to be easy to use, and you can do a lot with this particle system already. But you can imagine, like, if this is already for a basic particle system, what it would take for a 3D particle system or more complex ones. So let's see what we can change around here. So first off is the spawn interval. Spawn interval is basically the time in milliseconds between spawning sessions. So if we lower this to like 20 and do this to 10, it will spawn them every 10 to 20 milliseconds, and this is all going to be random. It's going to be between this and this value. Um, I'm not entirely sure if it actually takes this value, including, but it really doesn't matter that much. Um, let's see what this does. As you can see, the effect is uh, way more intense now. You can also see that there are more particles, but notice that how much more particles you have, it's going to impact the frame rate. So the more particles, the more intense your particle effects could be, but you also get less frames per second. So let's change this back a bit to what we had. There we go. Then you have the spawn count. It's fairly similar to the spawn interval, but this time, every time it spawns them, it spawns 10 to 25 particles. So if we up the maximum to 100, you will see that again more particles are being spawned. But what you see is that instead of spawning them more rapidly, you will spawn more at one session. So you can see that it's sort of pulsing a bit. So you can also see that sometimes it's more intense than other times. This is because sometimes it only spawn 10 and other times it will spawn up to 100. So let's change that back a bit because it's better to demonstrate with a clear particle effect here. The initial life is how long will the particle last. So if we up this to, let's say, 5 seconds, you'll see that some particles will last a lot longer and some particles will despawn much more rapid. So you can use this for bigger effects essentially, but let's change this back for now. Then we have the initial size. This is the size of the particles themselves. As you may have noticed, this image is only 32 by 32, and that's not really big, but you can increase the size if you want. So if we say it's going to be a maximum to 50 times the size, you can see that we get an intense effect, but we don't use a lot of particles, and you can see that the particles are just generally bigger, and that's what it's used for. If we lower this a bit, you can still see that they're bigger than they were at the start. And if we change this to 10 as well, you can see that it only spawns somewhat large particles here. But let's change that back, because I'm gonna describe what the X offset and the Y offset do. So what they do is basically you have a center point of your particle effect. You're going to say, okay, I want this particle effect to be at this position. But what you can do is you don't want to spawn all the particles at the same position, do you? So what you can do is you can say, okay, I want to spawn them between 200 from that position and minus 200 from that position. So what we're going to get is a really wide effect here, and you can see it's going to spread them somewhere between there. It's all based on the pseudo-random that your computer can do, so it's going to have some natural feel to it. And we can do the same with the Y here. So if we say, oh, we get a massive particle effect here. This is something you could use for a snow effect in your level, or maybe rain, but for rain you would have to use different particles probably. So that's what you could use this for. Let's lower this back down so that we have our particle effect again. This is the initial distance. The initial distance is basically, okay, we're not going to spawn them here, but we're going to spawn them over here, for example. If we increase this to, let's say, 200, you will see that the center here, no particles will spawn, but in a radius of like 200 pixels, this will be the position that the particles will spawn. So instead of spawning really close here, they will spawn them on the position here, but then adding the radius. So this is something that you could use for particle effects that have to be around an object instead of on them. So it's really useful. Let's change that back. Well, you probably guess what the speed is for. If we do that, some particles will have increased speed. if I change the values right, we could have some hyperspace particle effect, for example. Again, this will have a minimum and maximum setting. Let's change this back to what it was. Then we have the length of the particle effect. The particle effect, if you don't enable the length, it will just go on and on and on and on until you say, well, okay, it's over with this particle effect, let's remove it. What you can also do for explosions, for example, you could have turn this on, set the enable to true, and what you'll see here is it will last for about 5 seconds and then it will stop playing. This is really useful for explosions, as I said. But let's turn this back on. And then we have the spread value. The 360 basically describes this already. What it basically does is it gives you the angle that you want to spread this, and 360 is a full circle. But if we decrease this to 180, you can see it only spawns them upwards. So and we can change the direction of this by using the angular offset. So if we say, let's turn this around by 90 degrees, you can see now it's only on this side. So that's what you can use that for. For example, for a small flamethrower that you want to go to the side and not to the top and not to the back. Then we have the growth factor. The higher I put this, the bigger the particles are going to grow. But if we lower this to say, okay, we don't want them to grow, you can see there are small particles. So they're not growing now, but they're fading out still. But let's have this at 10 for now. You can see still our particles are growing. Then we have the gravity factor. The gravity factor, well, as you may guess, it gravitates the particles downwards. So this is what I used for the torches. As you can see the particles falling down. It's really useful for things like that. Then we have a starting alpha and an ending alpha. With all colors you can set an alpha. When we start a particle, when we create a particle, it's going to be its full color. So in this case, I think it's red or orange or something like that. It's going to be full orange. But what the particle system does is it's going to lower that alpha towards your end alpha, which is the alpha that is going to be at the depth of the particle or the destruction of a particle. So at the end you can see them fading out, but if we increase this to 200 for example, you can see them kind of disappearing, and that's why you want to set this to 0 or at least a low alpha, because it looks a lot better if they just slowly disappear instead of just disappearing instantly. But you can use it whatever you want, of course. Then last but not least is the color of the particles. That's why you use the white one, because if you have a white image, for example, you can easily say, okay, let's remove this and remove this and have it full red. It's red, blue, green, RGB from 0 to 1. So if we start them out fully red, you can see them starting out fully red. But what you can also do is specify a gradient. So if we say let's have them go towards blue, let's just remove this one in between, and let's say this, and the offset is again from 0 to 1. This is the starting point of the particle when it's created, and this is when it's destroyed. So what you see now is they start off red and then they go towards blue. Um, let's grow the particles a bit to make it more visible. See, they start off fully red, then they go towards blue. But if we want to add another one in between somewhere, so let's say we want to have a green in the middle of that, you can see it's red, then green, and then blue. So that's that. Um, if you fiddle around with this, you will see more clearly what it does. It's the best way of learning this, is just change these values around, see what it does, and stuff like that. Okay, let's now see how this program is built. So it's a simple state-based game. Few states here, I can change them by pressing 1, 2 and 3. So nothing fancy here. But then let's take a look at the heating particle. What you see here is one particle emitter. What you do is you have to have a particle system. You can have multiple systems if you want. It's best to kind of group them together. But what you can do with a particle system is say, okay, we're going to have a maximum of 1500 particles. And what happens if you hit that limit, for example, if we edit this again and say, okay, just spawn them every 10 milliseconds and spawn a lot of them. No, we haven't hit it yet. Let's increase it even more. And there we go. You can see it's hitting the 1500. You also get a warning here, so let's change it back down again. You can also see that the FPS is dropped drastically, but this is really something that is used to guarantee some kind of performance of your game, that you don't get too much particle effects, and it's really useful in that way. So maybe you want the particle system for all your effects, and you want a particle system for level-based effects. So that's where you can use it for. What a particle system also needs is it needs to know what kind of particle it's going to use. So in this case it's the particle plus that I made. So it's this one, really basic, but it's going to use the plus particle plus. It can be a PNG or whatever you want. It's a simple slick image. Then I load the XML file, which is healing.xml. This is a description of it. I'm not going to go into detail of this because I already showed it. Then we're going to use the configurable emitter. What you can also do is hard code more emitters, and by extending them from emitter or something. But why would you do that if you can use an XML file and just edit it that way? It's much more flexible, and it's also you can just change the XML file and don't have to change anything in your program to change your particle effect. So what you do is load it. Of course, try catch for when it fails to load. Just print the message and exit, or whatever you want to catch the exception with. Then we set the position of the emitter. It shows a random position here. It's actually not that random because it's the exact same position as the fire one here, but it's a simple X and Y value. Then we have to add the emitter to the system, and we can add a lot of emitters to the system. You can also remove the emitter. You can also remove all emitters, but also a particular one. So you can store the emitters in a list or whatever you want. But I'm just going to add them here because I just want to keep it going. Then we set the blending mode. There's two types of blending, an additive one and a combine one. I'm not going to describe what to do. You have to check it out for yourself, I guess. Then there's this stuff for changing the states. That's not that interesting here. What is interesting is we have the system update, and we have to update the system. So if we hold this, for example, you get a FPS drop for a few seconds, and what you see is that the update needs the delta to properly update. So if you have lower FPS, it's still gonna show about the same, and it's still gonna update, so you don't get really slow particle effects. That's really important. And then in the render function, we have to render the system, and basically it's the same as any other type of rendering. It's just going to draw your emitter on the screen. That's it for the particle effects, basically. So particle effects are not that complex. As you can see, you can basically edit a lot of things: the direction they go, the speed they have, the size that they grow, the particle that you're using, stuff like that. And it's really cool for having a lot of effects, because it looks a lot more realistic if you have a kind of random flame instead of a repeating pre-animated flame. So that's what you can use it for, and for flamethrowers and smoke and explosions and environmental effects, and just anything you can think of that has can be more natural if you use some kind of random. I will include this program in the description. You can check it out for yourself. You can change things. This will all be included. And I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you like this video and want to see more. Also check out the website in the description. It will have the link towards the download of this program, and it will have multiple tutorials on different subjects in Slick2D, and maybe in the future other programming languages and frameworks. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.